Welcome to Bridging Cultures, the mini-series for adoptive parents raising children across racial lines. If you've ever wondered how to help your child feel proud of who they are, how to talk about race without messing up, or how to ease the loneliness your child may not have the words for, you are in the right place. Today, we are joined by licensed clinical social worker Reggie Wilson and Crystal Marcial to uncover what transracial adoptees experience, especially during emotional and mental health crises, and what you, the parent, can do to support them. Reggie and Crystal, thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is such an important conversation. Let's start with you guys just telling us a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about this work.
Sure. Again, as you mentioned, my name is Reggie Wilson. I am the clinical director of the boys unit over at Oasis. And, my background is I've been doing this for, over 2 decades, worked in many levels of care as a therapist, as a clinical director. And in that time, I've had the pleasure of interacting with several adoptive families as well as transracially adopted families, and my interest is really wanting to make sure that I'm the best therapist that I can be to these families and support them the best way that I can. And I've teamed up with Crystal, who's also has had a variety of clients, including adoptive and transracially adopted clients. And so we came up with this idea to really step up and support these families, because I think there are some things that some do miss in situations like this. And so I am very happy to be here to help support parents who have bravely stepped into this position of adopting a child.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like you said, my name is Crystal Marcial. Most of my time as a therapist has been in the residential setting, and like Reggie described for him too, I got to see I was working a lot with adoptive families, and the more and more I worked, it was a lot of transracial adoption families. So I just became super interested in it, and I think there was a different take that I needed to have with them and just different needs that they had. And so it's been really great working with Reggie and just seeing how much we've learned together and through our time at Oasis. So that's really been just where my interest started and where it's continued now. We've learned a lot through working with the families, and it's been really cool to see through working with the parents, with siblings, just everybody put together where the families can really go. So just excited to share what we know.
Yeah, you guys have great expertise on this. And in fact, you guys actually started this as a presentation to therapists. And you've been presenting it at conferences and webinars, and it's phenomenal. So that's why I'm like, we've got to have you come on and share this with parents, because there's such valuable information that our parents could use regarding transracial adoption.
Yes, and I just want to add one thing, Tiffany, that one of the things that we really want is parents to know is that this in no way is any indication that adoption is not good or adoption is futile. Just the opposite. We really recognize that adoption, and we support adoption, is a good thing, and we really want to support the parents who have adopted transracially, as well as just regular adoptions, and so I'm hoping that parents can walk away from here with some really good information to help support and make connections with their child better.
Yeah, I love that. This can be a tricky world to step into, and this podcast goal is to provide hope, validation that they're not alone in what they're facing, and that these struggles are real. And then lastly, how can they seek out support, and what tools can they use to get the help that they need as they navigate this world?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yes.
For those who are new to this topic, can you define what is transracial adoption?
Yeah, transracial adoption or interracial adoption is when a parent who is of a different race from the child that they are adopting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And probably most of our listeners are already going to know what that is, but if we do have a few tuning in who haven't adopted and are curious about this topic, that's what it is. Anything you want to add to that, Reggie?
Yes, I just agree that we want to emphasize that adoption is a good thing, and that transracially adopted kids, not only do they have the adoption piece, but they also have the piece of the loss of cultural and identity and race.
Let's talk about some of the statistics and research out there about this topic. There's some really interesting things. So adopted children are statistically 7 times more likely to end up in treatment than non-adoptive children, which as a therapist myself, I've seen that to be very true working in the residential program. And this profound statistic underscores that parents are not alone and that their child's struggle is rooted in systematic risk factors, not parent failure, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad that you mentioned that piece, because it is not about parental failure.
Yeah.
Really, it is not. And so we want those parents out there to know that that there are a lot of issues that they are dealing with that are different than just a traditional adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. Other research published is that pediatrics found that adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-adoptees. And this really highlights that there's a crisis parents are seeing is not just teen angst. It's not just a normal thing. The risk is significantly higher that deserves immediate and compassionate attention. So another interesting one is that approximately 44% of all adoptions in the U.S. are transracial. So you may feel isolated in your specific neighborhood, yet you are navigating a journey shared by nearly half of all adoptive families, which I thought was really interesting. And then lastly, the unprepared feeling is normal. Like studies show that roughly 25% of adoptive parents report feeling unprepared for the complex realities of adoption. So if you feel overwhelmed as a parent, it's not because you are failing. It's because the task is complex and requires support you may not have received yet.
100%. Yeah.
So let's dive in. Many parents feel deep love going into adoption, right? There's something they desire. They're desiring kids, yet there's also maybe some fear along with this. What is the most important message you want to deliver to a parent listening because their child is hurting due to transracial adoption?
Well, what I would say is that that they have to, parents really need to understand that their teen is really going through a lot of issues with culture, with loss of identity, with the race, and when we talk about how can we support, how a parent can support these teens, it's really just understanding that you need to make yourself a safe place for conversations such as those to take place, and being able to help guide your teen through some uncomfortable conversations, and being able to say things like, I'm here when you want to talk about it, and make sure that it's not just a one-time conversation, that these kind of conversations take place all the time. And we certainly don't want to force teens to talk about those issues that they're struggling with, but we also want to help them know that whenever they're wanting to talk about it, that you're open and not be afraid to say, I don't know how that feels, but I can hear you.
I love that, because there's going to be times that maybe as a parent you don't know how it feels, and maybe you don't really understand, or maybe even you don't even agree, right?
Yeah, that is true.
I also want to add that with the child hurting, it's not focused on the rejection of the parent. It's just an additional part that they're trying to navigate, and it might sometimes feel like a rejection from their child, and it may be really hard. Just as Reggie mentioned, we're going to go into those hard conversations, but that's not where the child is coming from. It's just something that they also don't know how to navigate. So checking that for themselves as the parent, that, okay, like, we're okay, our relationship is good, or maybe as always there's something to work on, but it's not coming from that place.
I love that, because I think as a parent, it's easy to have our ego on the line a little bit when our kids come to us and give us feedback about us or parenting or a situation. And it's easy to take it as a personal attack, right? When really this issue isn't a personal thing. An adoptee may come to them and say, like, I feel alone and I don't fit into my family. And the parent may be like, well, I've given you everything and we love you and you're part of our family. Like, we don't see that, right? But that's not what they're saying. They're not saying you didn't do a good job or you didn't love me enough. They're just saying, I feel lonely. And for you to be able to show up and be like, and hold space without but don't you appreciate that we adopted you? You know, those kind of things is going to be so powerful to them. Put your stuff aside. And if you need to address it and work on it, do that separately.
Yeah.
But show it for your kid and know that that's really a lot of teenagers in general. There's times where they may attack us and fight with us, but it's like there's something always bigger going on, right?
Yeah.
And even with some of the comments that you just said of what the parents' response may be is, I've told families I've worked with when we're actually acknowledging, okay, we're going to go into these conversations, is that the parents are going to mess up, the kid's going to mess up, I might mess up.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, if we already made those comments, it's okay. We can go back and make those repairs. But just because those things have been said already, just acknowledge it's there, and then we'll move forward from it.
Yeah. And I'll just add that that our parents are wonderful and their intentions are great, and we want to applaud those things, and also we want to help them understand that it isn't really about you. This is not any kind of just thing about you didn't do this, you didn't do that, but it's recognizing your intentions are good, and how can we learn from things around us, and how can we help guide our teen through these things. So I would say that as a parent, the desire to learn more is really what I would like parents to walk away with, and not my kid doesn't like me.
Yeah. So being curious
and
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Holding space for maybe two opposing things at the same time.
Correct.
Kind of
Dialectics.
Yeah. I was going to say dialectics of, like, your child can feel loved and appreciative of you, and also feel incredibly lonely and maybe angry at times that they're adopted. Right? Those are two opposing things that you've got to hold space for them, and it doesn't have to do with you. Right?
That's it. Yeah.
Let's talk about that grief and loss. How does it show up in adoption, and even in stable, loving homes where parents have really provided all they could to this child that they've adopted?
Sure. So talking about grief and loss, with any kind of adoption, as we all know, that there is loss, there's grief, there's loss of identity, there's grieving over adoptive or birth families. All that stuff goes into how a child may approach life. Having said that, the same thing goes with adoptive parents. Sometimes there's a loss of that, of maybe of the dream that things are going to be perfect, and the grief that things are going to be the loss of that as well.
To add to that, I think parents are also facing infertility, a lot of our families, and that's what drives them to adoption. So that brings a whole lot of loss and grief as well.
Yeah, perfect point. And so when we talk about grief and loss, I mean, there's no different than grieving the loss of a loved one. All the different stages. There's 5 or 6 different stages of grief and loss, and so all that stuff does go into to adoption, and being able to help parents recognize that these are normal, that these are what anybody would feel, and that there's hope. There's hope at the end of that cycle, and being able to work through these things with your child, with the therapist or through other means. There is hope, and so So even though we go through this, there's there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
I think it's also coming from some of the parts that we may not think about. It's not just, focusing on the parents, but the child's memories or information about themselves that they don't have. It's also a loss of not having that information. And depending on when the adoption happened, it may also be that pre-verbal trauma that, maybe the kid doesn't actually remember or know what they're grieving specifically, but it's just what happened early in their life.
Yeah, because that was a question I had maybe for you is what about the kids who are adopted at birth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is their loss and grief from that?
They may still have those intense emotions and just maybe stories that they've been told, those become real. And, they'll have their own message of why the adoption happened. Even if they've been told something different, that can still be ingrained just like any other core belief. Mm-hmm. And so, that is real to the child and that's where the grief can come from.
Yeah. And we're finding research that there is attachment even in utero, mm-hmm. That the child is experiencing. So there's that loss, separation from their mother, right? Biological mother, that they're going to experience, maybe not realize they're experiencing it, till mm-hmm. later on, but that's a real thing as well. Mm-hmm. Let's add one more piece. So we talked about adoption and the grief and loss from that. What about the grief and loss from transracial adoption? Because that's even more complex.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think that that there's always issues with adoption, but then you add the loss of culture, mm-hmm. the loss of identity. So there's two kinds of losses, and the loss of a birth family, and then the loss of really who am I, where do I fit in, and that's where I really feel like we can help support parents in trying to help guide their teen through issues like that, because it's not their fault. I mean, those things happen, but also support the teens in trying to kind of bridge that gap and giving power to parents to help them bridge that with their teen. So yes, there's definitely that added loss for transracially adopted children.
Just like Reggie said, it's not their fault, but it may also be just the loss of the access to having information or just closeness to parts of their culture, just based on if they moved or were adopted in a different country, things like that. It's just that access in general is gone. So that's where the work comes in of parents being able to find where they can access that closer to the child, whether it's in their home, in their community, etc.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to dive more into what parents can do. We're first just addressing, first of all, parents, you're validated in your feelings. You came to wanting to adopt out of love, out of sometimes grief because you couldn't have your own, or for whatever reason, numerous mm-hmm. reasons. And maybe it feels at times like you're failing. Yet we really want our listeners to hear that you are not failing.
100%.
Yes. This is not a parent failure. It's not what you've done, and even if you've said the wrong things or done the wrong things, there is hope, because this is a complex developmental and racial reality that requires support and education, and that's why we're doing this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that along those lines, that what I hope our adoptive parents feel is that this is learning for them too. This can be something that they can really enjoy, because it encourages them to kind of step out of their comfort zone and be able to see a bigger part of maybe what they've been shielded from, I guess, by no fault of their own. But it could be fun learning for both.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to dive into, is educating and helping our listeners learn that they're not alone, there's hope, and here's some things we can help guide you along the way to use. So let's dive in. What are some signs an adoptee teen is struggling with adoption trauma or identity pain?
Well, I think that one of the things is, we talk about silent suffering. And some of the signs could be that, your teen is withdrawing, your teen is not doing some of the things that they used to love to do when they were younger. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're not talking as much as they used to. And maybe even they're saying, I'm fine, when obviously they're not. Some of those things are signs that, our teens are struggling. And so one of the things that I think parents can do to help in those situations is kind of opening up a conversation like, hey, I've noticed that that you're more quiet around certain situations, but doing it in a time frame where it's kind of relaxed and there's no angst going on, and encouraging their teen to openly discuss it if they'd like. So those are some of the signs that I think parents should look for. And when we talk about some of the ways that they can intervene, is helpful. So
I've seen some of the kids that I've worked with have changes in their relationships with friends or siblings too, or just extended family members who, whether they were neutral or closer, they just shift. Maybe they do withdraw still. And that just comes from not knowing if they can relate, or maybe still feeling some of that shame of not knowing if they can share how they're feeling with those family members. Even with kids or teens who have adoptive siblings too, they don't know if the siblings feel the same ways that they do. Mm-hmm. And so they start to withdraw from them too. So yeah, being curious about that would be a good response.
Would you say it's pretty common that sometimes they may grow up being really healthy and, this loving, fun kid, and then like the teen years hit and stuff starts to come out? Mm-hmm. Not always. Maybe sometimes they'll manifest things when they're younger, but I feel like my experience as a clinician is the parents often say like, oh, like things were great until we hit like 12.
Mm-hmm. Puberty. Yeah.
Puberty happened.
Yeah.
And not just the normal hormones, that more things were coming out, and not that typical teen hormone.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we all have been through, puberty, and we've all worked with teens who are going through puberty, and we've, our parents, they understand that. And what I want them to understand is for that transracially adopted teen, not only are they going through puberty, but also they're going through, all these other issues that typical teens that are going through puberty don't go through.
Well, let's talk about they're experiencing loss of identity, the grief we talked about, sometimes shame, and that cultural disconnect. I mean, what else?
Struggles with their self-esteem, not knowing where they fit in, just with that added layer of it too, having those negative core beliefs about themselves. A lot of the teens we've worked with have those core beliefs about who they are and just the role that they play in their family, and that's just who they are, and it'll spill into other areas of their life too. Yeah, and I really think feeling alone. Mm-hmm. Maybe even if they have an amazing family, amazing parents, that feeling right. When I've heard your presentation, it's like they're feeling lonely.
Yeah, and like you said, they could have really, and that's one of the things that are really hard from I guess a parent's point of view, or maybe even an outsider's point of view, is that they seem to have it all, right? They seem to have things that a lot of families value. They have love, they have great homes, and parents are very supportive, and their outside activities and things like that. And yet, they do tend to suffer silently because they on one side they can see that they have a lot to be thankful for, and at the same time they have these things that other people can't see. Mm-hmm. So
it's something that they can't really describe, so that's where I think the feeling alone comes from too. They don't know who can relate unless they're talking to somebody who maybe also is a transracial adoptee. But even then, that experience is going to be different for every person.
Yeah. I want to dive just a little deeper into the adoptive trauma and how it's manifests. Like we talked about the withdrawal, isolation, maybe even sudden aggressive behaviors. But I think there's also times too where they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing, right? Like I think you've mentioned an example of hoarding food. And, maybe you ask them like, well, why are you hoarding food? We have plenty of food. And they may say like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Tiffany, I think one of the things what we really need to understand is that we really don't know, right? I mean, typically in therapy, we hear that a lot, right? Oh, I don't know why I do what I do. And there's a function behind it. And for parents, for therapists, and for other mentors, helping them find the language, because a lot of times they don't have the verbiage to especially talk about what they're feeling or how they're feeling or why they're feeling this. And so for us as to helping them to find the language, and that can be as simple as a parent sitting down with their child and just going through, maybe putting their self in that child's shoes, and maybe talking and offering suggestions, and then explaining what those things mean. So
they may not have the insight of why they're doing those things because they are in that crisis mode.
Yeah.
They are not in a place to be able to logically think through those things. And so that's where that building that common language is going to be really important for them to have a baseline. And, we know that that's not going to happen when they're actively in crisis. That needs to be at a point when they're regulated and able to have those discussions. So getting those I don't know responses is just going to be common because they actually don't. They're not able to think through it in that moment.
So how can parents show up in that crisis moment and hold space for them as they're trying to gain insight and search for the vocabulary that they need?
Well, I mean, first of all, creating a space of safety. I'm a safe place. You can talk to me. You can say anything you'd like to me. I'm here when you want to talk. I think validation is really good too, and validating what that teen may be saying, no matter how off base it is, or maybe even insensitive it is. But I think the biggest thing is just being a presence for your child. Just being there and letting them know that I can go to mom and dad and they're going to help me with this. And I don't have to worry about how I say it or what I say. I can just get it out. So.
But just with what you said about dialectics and the parents being that safe person for the child to go to, being aware that the child may have different perspectives as they continue to have those conversations, listening to the child in that point in time will actually create that safe space. We may focus more on the response of, well, what can I do or say to make it better? It may not make it better. It's just holding that space to actually listen and understand where the child is coming from. And if their sharing or response changes in the next week or in the next month, it's just great. That's where they're at in that point in time. But there's not a right answer or a wrong answer. It's just kind of understanding where the child is at.
I love that. I think parents need to realize they don't always have to know and have the right answer.
Right.
And we don't, as therapists, we don't always have the right answer. But if you can hold space and say like, I don't know what to say right now, but I love you and I'm here for you. And if you can at least connect with the, like, I know what it's like to feel lonely, or I know what it's like to feel unheard or not seen. Like I can connect with that with you, right? Like that's all you really need to say is I'm here. I love you. And I've felt similar emotions. I don't understand completely, but I'm here, right? Some parents are going to notice that their teen may pull away from them, especially when parents don't share their racial experience. So how can parents have an early conversation about race? Like, why does that matter? And why can't families be colorblind?
Well, I would say, first of all, that the discussions about race should happen early and often. I really feel like, waiting until it comes up may not be fair to either parents or their teens, because if we talk about it early, then we're learning. We're in the process of learning, and we're guiding our teen into understanding that talking about race doesn't have to be a scary thing. And so I think the earlier the better.
Families can't be colorblind because the child is going to be aware of it sooner than the parents realize, too. It's something that we may not think about just kids in general, but they do start to notice when they're in elementary school. And their friends pointed out, right? Like even in coloring, they'll point out some of those differences too. So that's going to be a part of their lives in general. And so just bringing it as part of the conversations that they're going to have at home is just going to actually create that safe space for the kids to have it. And again, if it hasn't happened at this point, start now. That's going to be soon.
Never too late.
Yeah, never too late. And even with the families that we've worked with and just comments that I've gotten from transracial adoptees, they've appreciated the bluntness that some of their parents have had of just like, hey, people are going to point out we have different skin tones, that you may not be the same race as I am. And the kids appreciated that because maybe those were some of the earlier comments that they got and not some of the mean comments that maybe kids who didn't know how to address that. Things that they said instead.
Well, and I think what I want to add to that, because I agree 100%, is the reason we can't be colorblind in situations like that is because the world isn't. The world is not colorblind. And although it's a great thought, as I don't see color, and I applaud that, but at the same time, if we don't recognize that there's a difference, then we're kind of setting things up to be harder down the line.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you guys say is that while the intention to not talk about race and to say I don't see color is good, and you're seeking to protect your child, right? And be like, we want to include you. We don't want you to feel alone. Like, these differences shouldn't matter. The reality is you're not necessarily preparing them for when that kid at school or someone at the grocery store says something awkward or mean or we'll talk about microaggressions, right? Down the road, like do something like that. That's going to cause damage, right? So opening that door and saying, hey, look, we're just going to call it what it is. Here's the differences. Here's what people may say that, it's actually doing what the parent's intention is helping them feel loved, included, and part of the family. And when those hard things happen, they know they can go talk to their parents.
Yes, 100%. And I think that Crystal is right. I've had clients also say that, I want to hear it. I want to talk about it. And as maybe hard as it may sound to have a conversation like that, the bluntness is really what our teens, what they like, what they want to hear. And so helping them, guide them through it as early on as we can is, I think, preferable.
I kind of, want to relate it for parents listening. This might be a helpful example, but I've lost both of my parents and rather closely, and I'm a younger age as an adult, and I feel like, and gone through a divorce, and with all those three things, I feel like people, don't know what to say, and they don't know how to show up for me, and there's those one-liners that actually are more hurtful than helpful, and then people who avoid it and don't say anything. And actually, the best thing people could do is be like, how are you doing? I'm so sorry you lost your parents. I don't know what to say, but I'm here if you want to talk about it, or tell me about your parents, or talk to me about the hardest thing, about this loss. Like, that's the stuff that resonates with me as I've gone through that grief and loss, to be like, oh, these people care, and they may not know what to say, and that's okay, but they're not going to tiptoe around me, right? And walk on eggshells, because that's actually more hurtful.
That's more hurtful.
Yeah,
absolutely, because and that teen knows that there's an elephant in the room and nobody wants to talk about it. So what does that mean and how does that relate to me?
Yeah, exactly.
I think this goes in a little bit later, but maybe it'll fit in here. Just having that kind of response and tiptoeing around it then causes the child or teen to then be aware of that person's emotions and want to take care of them instead of addressing their own.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. If a parent who's listening does struggle to have a conversation about race, what are some tips that they can start to do that now and realize that it's not too late? Like you said, it's never too late.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So first of all, recognize that, they may not feel comfortable talking about that. Recognize that in their own biases, that like, am I going to bring any biases into this? And why haven't I talked about this earlier? Do I have some hesitation? And address those things as maybe obstacles to like, having a healthy conversation with their teen about. And then just this podcast, I hope, will help them find ways. But there's literature out there. There's educational tools out there that can help them understand first of all, where they're coming from, and then second of all, like, understand that it's okay to not know. It really is. It's okay to not know how your teen feels in certain situations, but that's where you can ask. I don't know how this feels, but how does it feel for you to be maybe, the only, African American in your class, or, I don't know how it feels to be live in a neighborhood where you're the only one of your race in the neighborhood. Just being able to offer those open-ended questions so that it can start a conversation that maybe you learn from as well.
Yeah, I think just acknowledging you don't know what you don't know with the kid asking those questions would be really good. And little complex part here is being aware that the child is not going to be their educator, but so taking in their perspective is going to be helping them navigate it, and then taking that and doing their research or just talking to other people who may be able to give them more of a perspective on it outside of that, so then they can come back to their child and continue to have those conversations.
I love that. And we're going to dive into like support groups and things they can resources they can look into, but I think ultimately it comes down to parents do your own work. Like, if you need to get into therapy, if you're not, find a therapist who could help you navigate this, because this is a tricky conversation. It's a tricky situation and complex, right? And so do your own work. Get yourself to be able to go through the weeds with someone that's not your child holding your hand, right? And educating you on it, and then figuring out what your own biases are, and then that way you can find stability and be that constant for your teen who is maybe up and down and struggling through it, right? When you can manage your own emotions and your own biases and maybe your own history and trauma around it, then you can really show up for your kids. Can you educate our listeners on what ghost kingdoms are?
Sure. I think the best way for me to kind of tell this is that if you have a transracially adoptive child, and they have not been exposed to a lot of people or places that they can identify with. Sometimes what happens is they develop these what we call ghost kingdoms, and that is where they may see be on TV, whether it's TV or whether it's in the grocery store or wherever, famous people that look like them. Whether they're a male, female, typically it is an African American male or an African American woman who they see on a daily basis, particularly on TV or movies or whatever, and they develop these images that's who they belong to. Those are my mom. Those are my dad. I mean. I of course I had parents growing up, and it was one of those things where parents divorce at an early age. I lived most of the time with just my mom, but I would see black males who were doing well and have families, and I would put myself in that family. I belong to them. That's my dad. But they develop these ghost kingdoms because they have a strong need to belong to a family, have a mom and dad that look like them.
That can also relate to like someone who's adopted from South America or Russia,
Anyway,
where they're
sure.
trying to find something that they can relate to, and they create this fantasy family, right? Which leads us to our next important discussion is mirrors. What are mirrors, and how can parents help them seek them out to help the adoptive child thrive?
Mirrors are mentors, teachers, people who the child can relate to that may be the same race that they are. I think with the teens that we've worked with, the mirrors may not always be the same race that they are, but just people who maybe they can relate to a little bit more. With the transracial adoptions, mostly or being more common with a white parent and a child who is not, and the child is a minority, I've seen the teens be able to relate to other people who are also minorities and just not white, and then that becomes one of their mirrors. So yeah, that's what they are, just people who they can relate to who is different from their parents.
I think you had a cool story when I was talking to you about how one of your clients showed up and the parent had never met you and seen you.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to share that story? I loved it.
Yeah. So with our families, a lot of the time, we get to meet the teen before we get to meet the parents. And we email back and forth, maybe have phone calls. And I was working with this teen and mom, and that's exactly what we had done. We had emailed back and forth, had a couple calls, and then finally we got on a video call for a family session. And this is without teen present. And we go into some of the intro stuff, and before we bring the kid in, mom goes, "Can I just say something? Like, can I just say, like, I'm just so happy you're not blonde, blue-eyed with a pixie cut." And just that sentence has stuck with me. And, you know, she didn't mean anything bad about it. She's white, and it was just, you know, the way that she spoke. She was very blunt, very upbeat in her way of saying it. But it was just a way of pointing out, like, hey, like, this is the first time my child is working with somebody who is a minority. And, you know, she's had great connections with other therapists. And it's just like, this is going to be a other layer to your relationship with her as her therapist that's going to be different. And it did turn out that way. And thankfully, you know, Tina and I did have a good connection therapeutically. And Teen would point out, like, hey, I told my aunt, like, my therapist is Latina, and, like, it's super cool and all these things. So it was also a good point for me to reflect on my work with this teen and just all the teens that I was working with at the time and moving forward, that, you know, this teen is Black and I am not. And so although we could relate on some things, I also had to do my own work to understand her perspective and what she was going through. So just because we could relate on some things, it didn't mean that my work was done either. So
I love that. I love that example and the importance of having a mirror. Having a mirror of someone who is in a teacher role, a therapist role, a successful role, and realizing, like, they can see that person who's of their culture or maybe of a different culture, and that they're doing well and thriving and successful, and that allows them motivation and excitement and connection that they need to also do well, thrive, and be successful, right? Mm-hmm. That's a really good predictor of that.
Yeah.
Why do names, hair care, food, and cultural representation matter?
Well, I'll speak to the first two. First of all, I know that, you know, for at least African Americans, especially females, that their hair is their crown, and that's how they identify. And being able to have a parent understand that that's something that really most kids don't think about. But for African American females, that is probably one of the most things that they, as they get older, that's number one for them, is how does my hair look, and to wear it proudly, and to understand that people around them understand it, especially parents understand it. You know, culture-wise, I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that our teens need to feel that they belong, that there's a space for them, and that they're not just kind of floating from culture to culture. They have to exist in both cultures. We understand that, and sometimes just existing, it doesn't feel like they belong. And so I feel like we as therapists, as adoptive parents, and other mentors, we have to understand that belonging is really something that's very, very important.
It's important because it's a part of their identity. It's also some things that they can share with others and be proud of. And so with the culture, with sometimes even language,
it's music, right?
Yeah, music, food, all of that. It's something that we share with other people, and that's also a way that we make connections. So just as some of their classmates or other friends that they have may be sharing parts of themselves and their traditions and everything else that goes along with that, they also want to share with that. And it's great when they're able to share, you know, what their immediate family has, and also added parts of their race and that area of their culture. Some of the things that the kids or teens have navigated is sometimes name changes. And I think I gave this example before, but with even like my name, right? You asked me at the beginning, like, yes, how do you say this? And I just have people call me Crystal, but if it's in Spanish, it's Cristel. And so things like that matter. And I've, you know, had some people call me that, or even with Hispanic people, if we speak Spanish back and forth, they call me Cris because it's like a term of endearment, and it's not that we're close. It actually kind of throws me off a little bit, but it's things like that that cultures may have, and that they want to be able to share with other people.
Yeah.
I think what I'll add to that, and I've heard that story from Crystal a number of times, and it always makes me smile because it's true, and the one thing that I really want to stress is that, you know, you mentioned music, you mentioned clothing. There's sometimes a tendency to guide kids away from certain kind of music and guide them away from certain kind of clothing and certain friends. And what I really want parents to know is that sometimes that is their teen trying to identify and trying to belong. And so rap music, for example.
I was hoping you'd talk about this.
Yeah. Rap music, for example. You know, most parents, especially if there's offensive wording in there and things like that, will certainly disallow that in their home, which I think that's another discussion. But what I want them to understand is that it's not so much going against what parents want or being defiant. It's them trying to belong and to identify. And so how can we help bridge that gap? Is just educate and also set some limits, but help parents understand that it's not a defiant thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways that you can find music that is edited and clean.
Sure.
And they can still listen to the rap music. You may not like it, you may not understand, but if that's their connection, allow them to have that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about, you know, especially black hair. Black hair is so different than white hair, and that our hair dries out a lot. And we need special chemicals and special treatment for our hair, and so going to a barber who is a person of color who understands that is going to be a lot more supportive than going to a barber who doesn't understand that and just cutting hair. So treating our hair is going to be a lot different than what most barbers do. So it is important for our parents to understand that and to seek out stylists or beauticians or barbers who get that, who understand it, so that the teens feel supported, and there are things that even parents can do. There's products out there that they can buy and have in their home, and through education help their teens manage that. But being able to have those type of people who you can kind of tap into their knowledge and their lived experiences. I remember when my children were younger, she wanted braids, and it was like, okay, well, I know where to go, and it was a long process, but they knew what they were doing, and she felt very supported, and it was one of those things where I was like, this is what we'll do. But I had that knowledge. So I think about parents who don't have that knowledge. I'm hoping that they can learn from this podcast that there are places out there that they can take their teens to who understand the difference in just styles of hair.
Yeah. I think my parents just listening to this podcast shows that they're willing to show up, do the work that they need to do, and educate themselves.
Yes.
To be the type of adoptive parent that their adoptee needs, right?
100%. Yeah.
I mean, so again, thank you parents for listening, and that message of do your work, do what you need to do. It's not always going to be correct and right, and it's an up and down process, but the fact that you're here shows that you care and you want to do the right thing.
100%. Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned finding a barber or someone who is of the same race, because then there's that mirrors aspect again, right?
There's a mirrors aspect, yep.
Let's talk about preventing unintentional harm during a vulnerable moment with our transracial adoptees, right? So what are microaggressions, and why do they hit harder during a crisis?
Microaggressions are pointing out those differences focused on the differences of race. It's usually done in a passive way, or maybe more of a passive-aggressive way, which is why it's a microaggression. So there are things that, people may say that are said in a joking manner or trying to be a lighthearted thing, but is actually causing harm to the person receiving it or other people listening to it. So some of the things that we hear sometimes are, a common one may be like, you don't look like your parents, or I'm trying to think of some other ones with, I know you had some really good ones with.
Well, just even talking about, you should like this food. Black people really like, fried chicken, for example, or, but the thing that I want to add to microaggressions is that sometimes people don't even know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes, they may feel like they're actually being supportive.
Yeah.
And they just don't really know that maybe that lands a different way for in certain situations, and it could be parents, it could be siblings, it could be extended family, it could be teachers, it could be friends, it could be a lot of different groups of people. We just need to understand that those things exist, and maybe help educate parents in how to respond and how to help their teen respond.
So that leads me to my next question is, how can parents respond when others commit microaggressions against their child?
I would say correcting it. It may not be, fully educating the person who made the microaggression, but even saying something in response that corrects the statement or just points out that there was something not okay about what was said can help the child know that they're supported. And then that way they, in that moment, they get that correction for them to hear of like, oh, okay, there's acknowledgement that wasn't okay. My parent is aware. I don't have to then carry this and wonder, like, was that okay? Was it not okay? Because that's usually how the microaggressions come off, that, it may not be something that's super blunt and like, oh, I didn't like that. It's just maybe this uneasy feeling. And as a child and teen are trying to understand that for themselves, getting that correction from the parent would be good.
And I want to add to that and just say that a lot of microaggressions take place in the schools. And so when your teen comes home and complains about those things, or maybe your teen isn't even aware that it was a microaggression, but they come out home and they talk about it. What is a parent's response? And what I would say is certainly educate your kid, but also I would certainly take it up with the school in terms of what took place and what is their response going to be to that.
Crystal, you had a great example when I've talked to you about a microaggression you experienced at school that I'd love you to share with our listeners.
So in high school, I grew up in Provo, Utah, so it's diverse but not too diverse, right? And I thankfully was able to be in a lot of concurrent enrollment classes or honor classes, and in those classes, I was often one of two kids who were minorities in there. And so I came to my senior year and I was in a ballroom team and was taking all of these extra classes to get college credit. And so I went to the counselor's office and my counselor wasn't there for whatever reason. So I had to speak with somebody else, and who actually happened to be the person who was assigned a lot of the Hispanic kids because she was bilingual and she got to work with them and could help. So I was really surprised that I got this from her. But I showed her my schedule and she had to approve it because I had so many extra classes or a full schedule on my senior year, which wasn't required. And I could have just graduated early if I wanted to. But she looks at my schedule and I have everything on there with like the team and the concurrent enrollment classes and the honor classes. And she says, "Are you sure you can do that?" And to me, it wasn't even a question at that point. I had done it all throughout high school. I had been involved and, she signed it off and it was fine. And I took the classes that year. But it was something that, that microaggression was her questioning if I could do it. Again, I was one or the only person or one or two kids in there who were minorities in those classes. And this is my assumption maybe, but just knowing that those other kids didn't get those questions, it was just a given that they were able to have that caseload or have that course load and
because
be
of their
successful.
Race, right?
Yeah. Because of access or support and everything that they have. And, she just asked that question and that was a microaggression.
Yeah, no, I love that example. Thank you. What common parent phrases can actually make teens feel more alone? Like they're intended to help, but yet they only make the situation worse.
So yeah, it could be, you should be grateful. Anything that starts with a but of like, but we love you, or like, but you are a part of our family. We have sacrificed so much to have you. Things like, think about your siblings and what they've gone through. Anything that just minimizes their experience.
Color, or we don't see color. We don't see color, or we love you as much as our bio children.
Yeah.
I mean, even though that sounds. I believe that a lot of parents do feel that, and that also can be a microaggression.
Yeah, or why are you making this about race? And again, if you're listening and you're like, oh, I have said those things, it's okay.
It's okay.
You're not a bad parent.
Right.
You're showing up here, which is amazing. So it shows that you care. And there are ways you can redirect and even go back to your child. And that's the best thing about parenting, no matter what situation you are in, is to be able to go back and be like, hey, I made a mistake. Or I shouldn't have said this.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel? Like, let me repair this.
Yeah, and it really, I feel like this is an educational situation where we can, like you said, go back and say, you know what, how did you feel when I said this, or how did you feel when Uncle Johnny said this, or whatever, and really kind of put some different language to it, and helping your kid navigate those feelings.
Yeah. Well, let's move forward to how can parents seek support, what groups are out there, things like that, to help them be the most successful. So my question is, what long-term support helps teens develop a stable racial and cultural identity?
Well, I think, first of all, having a a parent who is willing to do their own work, and to understand that, that my child doesn't have to protect me from any kind of cultural or racial or identity issues that they may have. They can come to me at any time. I think that's first and foremost. I also think that parents should develop some consistency to identifying different groups, maybe even movies and cultural holidays that come up that they can have their teen attend, and make it a family thing. This is a family thing. It's not just me and my child, but our entire family. Celebrate those kind of things, and again, being a presence, a safety presence for your child, to help them to feel supported.
I love an example that you shared with me that talked about a family you worked with that realized that their child really needed support. They needed mirrors, and that they lived in a community that did not have that. It was predominantly not of their race. Mm-hmm. Can you share with our listeners what that family chose to do? Because I love it.
Yeah,
and not all families need to do this, but it just is one great example.
But I think that it does underscore the importance that this family recognize. These parents recognize that they can do more, or that there's, and like you said, everybody doesn't have to do this, but just relocating to a part of the city where there was more diversity, and being able to step out of something that maybe they've been used to for years, and step into something that they're not so used to, and that was a big step. And at the same time, I take my hat off to them, because that requires a lot of commitment. And so I feel like there are times where maybe, if you're maybe not willing to or can't relocate, because that's a real issue too, being able to go out of your way to make those situations more of an occurrence, where your child is able to touch base with mirrors and people who look like them, and groups who have gone through the same kind of thing, those lived experiences. So yeah, that was really nice for me to see happen during the course of my work with them. I
think maybe parents don't necessarily need to move and relocate, but just even like an example of finding a therapist who is both adoptive competent and culturally competent for your child, maybe someone that mirrors them as well. And maybe that means they're not close by. Maybe you have to drive a little further, right? When parents are looking for a therapist like that, what questions should they ask?
Well, I think first of all, when they're looking for a therapist, there's help out there to find the therapist. Sometimes our parents, this is their first kind of situation that's come up where they do need to go outside of what they're used to. But hiring an educational consultant, for example, who know programs, who know therapists, who know issues that people are better in serving, where like transracially, and so educational consultants can be a great source. Of course, the internet, in looking for a competent therapist that deals with adoptions, and other resources, like just even word of mouth, maybe people who have been through the same thing. I think there's parent groups out there. Well, I know there's parent groups out there who can help with this. So I think all those things can be ways that our adoptive parents can tap into as a resource.
Are there support groups that are focused on like transracial adopted kids or mentorship communities or opportunities that they can seek out?
I think it depends depending on where the families are at. We work with people from all over the U.S. And so I think the more and more that we've had presentations or talked to people about this topic, then we've actually found that there are support groups, which I think is what Reggie's referencing to.
Yeah. What kind of trainings should a therapist possibly have? And are there trainings maybe parents can also seek out for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Crystal mentioned, I think the TAC training, the adoption competency for therapists.
So what's TAC training for our listeners?
It's training for adoption competency. And it, as Crystal mentioned, it has various levels. And I believe the first level is for more
it's an introduction course.
So a parent could take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, as far as the therapists go, there's centers for adoption support and competency and case training. The acronym is CASE, education and training, I should say. But that is where therapists, mental health providers can go, and it is a pretty in-depth training. It's like almost a year.
Yeah,
training.
It's a year-long training.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of we're going to be doing that training here coming up, their next cohort. Mm-hmm. And so we're excited about that. All of our therapists at Oasis will be certified through that program. But yeah, those kind of things are out there, and we encourage anyone who have dealt with this population to go through it.
I love it.
It would definitely be appropriate to ask the therapist that they meet if they have experience working with adoption or transracial adoptions. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's some of the things that they can speak on if they've gone through a training, whether it's this one or a different one. But yeah, it's always appropriate to ask.
Okay. So there are resources out there. I guess really check around in your community, talk to other people. I'm sure they're on certain social media platforms. You could probably find groups that you can connect with and network to further learn. So there are a lot of actions that parents can take to become more racially aware and provide more hope and support and feeling like belonging for their child and for themselves as well, yeah. Right? To navigate this. What message would you want adoptive families to take away about seeking help?
It's never too late. It's never too late. I would certainly want them to understand that if you're watching this podcast and you feel that that there's some things that you can take from this and learn and add to whatever else you're doing, because what you're doing now is good. There's things that adoptive parents are doing that are positive, and we certainly want to echo that and let you know that this is just some more support to help maybe fill in some of the gaps. And so certainly want them to see this as a tool that they can use to, first of all, look at themselves and to encourage them to do their own work.
I would echo that, just that it's not too late, and doing their own work includes parents getting support for them too.
Yeah. I agree. Do your own work, because then you can show up for your child the way they need you to. Mm-hmm. Would you guys please end with sharing a success story that you've experienced in your time as a therapist?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a family that was with us not too long ago. Parents were very aware of how the transracial adoption was impacting their child, and teen hadn't talked about it a ton. They had gotten the comments, some of those microaggressions pointing out, you don't look like your parents, comments like that. But we actually were able to go into it a little bit deeper while he was at Oasis. And we got through identifying some of those core beliefs, and parents were very involved in challenging some of those and reframing a lot of them while also being very validating. So yeah, I mean, that's the family that sticks out for me. They definitely have done their own work in setting up those mirrors as the child transitioned home, and figuring out, taking all of these steps and finding a therapist that would be able to continue to do that work now that they were actually addressing it. The family's time at Oasis was, focusing on that stabilization, and we got to that point and were able to start those conversations at a deeper level. So that's a success story to me, because we were able to actually start the conversation again. It was not too late, and because they were able to continue it and set up what the family needed for it to continue after Oasis.
Yeah. I have several, and the one that I really want to kind of emphasize today is I had a family, not from Utah, but from out of state, who brought their son into see us at Oasis, and I started working with them. This family, very much well-intended, great parents, just came into therapy admitting, hey, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to hear, even if it's something that I need to change. And but we're just looking for guidance. So we're motivated to find ways to connect with our son. And during our work there, helping them understand that their son was having behavioral problems, but on paper, it looked, like they were, oppositional, looked like they were defiant, and really what was going on was a lot of the other stuff that we talked about today, and so helping parents to see that we needed to pivot in the way that we thought about and observed the behavior. So once we found out what the function of the behavior was, once we found out how parents can help start conversations about race, culture, and identity connection, they did really well. They thrived. He graduated, and recently I received a card from. It was a graduation announcement. That's awesome. That the young man had graduated high school, along with a letter, just thanking Oasis for the help in helping steer this family in the right direction. So that for me sticks out.
I love it. There are success stories. There are hope, and to our listeners, you're not alone, and it's never too late.
Yes.
Thank you, Reggie and Crystal, for showing up today and talking about such an important message with us.
So, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie and Crystal, for guiding us through this important topic. And thank you so much for the listeners who tuned into this difficult conversation. It means you care. It means you're learning. And learning is love in action. In our next episode, we'll look at how residential programs like Oasis can help transracial adoptees who are struggling and give families the support they need.